Hello, Dark Reader, and welcome to the Dark Side of the Library podcast. I'm your host, Katie. Today, we are going to be doing our minisode on a book called The Thing in the Snow. This is by Sean Adams. There wasn't a lot of information that I could find about Sean Adams, but he did a book previously called The Heap. This book, The Thing in the Snow, is his second novel, and it was published by HarperCollins. So I'll just kind of break down the summary of the book for you, and then we'll get on to how I felt about this novel, which might be kind of like it's not a two-parter episode or anything, but it's kind of like a two-parter feels thing going on in this episode. So here's the breakdown of this book. First, it is a satire for sure. So it's kind of like a dark humor workplace satire mostly, and it's supposed to give you those feels of being claustrophobic. So we have a facility called the Northern Institute. It's placed in the far reaches of the world. It's basically in this place where it's icy, there's a lot of snow, and it's hard to get to. So it used to be a bumbling research facility, very busy, but something made the whole entire process stop. So all of the researchers had to evacuate. No time or anything like that. They don't really give you information as to why, but they've abandoned this whole place and left. Well, not left. They hired 3 people. So the 3 people that they hired to go back to this research facility, or who were already there, they are there to basically just maintain this research facility. So our characters are Gibbs, Hale, and Klein. We also just have some guy there, like a previous research assistant, and his name is Gilroy, and they don't really, he's there to research the sensation of coldness, but they're like, why didn't he leave? Their task is really, really simple. All they have to do is, 1, basically just stay there. They're just seat holders for when the possibility of the research facility opens up again, and they're just there maintaining certain things, like, do the chairs work? Are they falling apart? Making sure the door hinges are properly greased up, just like those kind of mundane tasks, and they do it every single day. And they are given orders by one particular person, and that is given to Hale, who is our main protagonist. He feels like this is a big opportunity for him. He wants to learn. He basically wants to show off his leadership skills. He's really thrilled about it. And this kind of abruptly comes to a halt when they find this thing out in the snow. There's a few rules about this place. So one of them is they can't mess with the thermostat. And the other one is they cannot go outside. We think that it's because, it's really freaking cold out there. So one of them, Gibbs or Klein, sees this thing out in the snow, and this becomes a huge distraction for their workflow, which really bothers Hale, because this is the opportunity of a lifetime, and he's supposed to keep everybody in order and whatnot. So, and he only has to watch over 2 people and himself. So it's kind of like he should be able to do this, right? So the thing in the snow has made everything very difficult, because they're like, what is it? They want to measure how far it's gone. Does it sit still? What is this random thing that's popped up in the snow? So it becomes an obsessive thing that people are thinking about. And then all of a sudden, the smooth process becomes really hectic for Hale. So things start to become more claustrophobic, like he's realizing that maybe things aren't the way they seem, like he can't remember the weekends, they seem like a blur, he can't remember what he actually did except for maybe laying around in bed all day, or, just that kind of thing. Just small little tidbits start to become more apparent that maybe this place isn't actually what they think it is. So that is the basis of The Thing in the Snow. I picked it up because I read the summary of it and I thought, wow, this sounds hilarious. It just sounded really funny. So I'll tell you my first impression of the book, and then I'm going to tell you my revisitation. So my first impression of the book, I gave it a 2-star. I was not thoroughly impressed with it. I felt like, I don't know if this resonates with you, but sometimes I get a lot more feeling and I can't articulate exactly what the feels are. So I can inwardly know these experiences and I'm like, oh, this is so familiar, or I know exactly what these characters are talking about. But for some reason, it's hard for me to articulate or get it up the other way, like write it down. So originally I felt a lot of stuff, but there was so much going on in my head that I think I just didn't fully grasp everything that was going on in this story. I felt like I got a little lost, and it felt smarter than me. I was like, maybe I'm just not cut out to really enjoy this story. That's how I felt initially. After I let it soak in a little bit and I read a few things, I was like, wait, okay, the feels that I got, somebody else was able to articulate that way better than I possibly could have. And I was actually worried about this podcast episode. I was like, man, I read this book and I want to talk about it. Those were my first impressions. So here's the thing that I do think consistently is a con about this book. It is a slow burn, very slow. It is not what you would expect, and it doesn't necessarily even get to that hype that you really wanted it to, especially when considering that it's kind of sold as a bit of a psychological thriller. There was no thrill ride. When I read thriller, I'm like waiting for that roller coaster to go up really, really high and then pummel down. That doesn't really happen at all in this story. Like, there's a bit where it inclines in the story, but then it's just like, boop, we're done. So it was a little frustrating in that regard, and that seems to be a theme overall. A lot of people do think it's really slow. Along with that, this book is really dividing. So definitely not a lot of people are going to appreciate this book, especially maybe you have worked in a place where you're actually really happy. You haven't really had a problem like this before. Maybe it doesn't resonate with you, or you can't really empathize with it. That's a possible problem that might happen, although I would say you're very lucky, and good job if that's the case. Another thing is, because of the slow pacing of the story, it muddles down a lot of that claustrophobia, and it's just like, just give it to me. I just want to feel a little uncomfortable, but it never seems to happen. It's really, it inches forward sometimes. But I realized I sat and I read the entire thing, and I still felt like I was mostly entertained the entire way. Pleasantly so. It was like a good little boat ride, I guess. But I never got that excitement that I was really anticipating from this book. There wasn't a lot of big laughs either. So when I read, this is a dark humor, satire, that is totally up my alley, especially if you're talking about any sort of work griping. Everybody loves The Office. There is definitely a big audience for that kind of stuff. So I was waiting for those big laughs, and I got a couple where I was just like, oh, that's funny. Yes. But I didn't get those big laughs or like, oh, I'm laughing at something really horrible and I shouldn't, but it's still really funny. I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but I always wait for those for dark humor, and I didn't really get that with this novel. So it wasn't actually that funny. Parts were humorous and it was entertaining, but it wasn't like a lot. So some deeper themes in this book as I sat with it, and why I'm giving it just a little higher. It's probably about a 3.5 star for me now that I'm thinking about it a little further. There are some great themes in here, and I wish it was maybe expanded on. Maybe that's not the right word. Again, maybe leaned into that claustrophobia and thrill part a little further, and then it would have been a way greater novel. So some of the themes include feeling isolated, especially at work. There's a lot of these really great work-like themes in here. So you're being told specific things by your superiors and you just do them, and you're thinking you're doing them you're just being such a good worker. So that's a theme in here, just workplace drama, management, corporations, mighty secrets that these corporations are hiding, and you're just a cog in the wheel, and you're just doing exactly what you're told, and you're just trying to be a good boy, but it's for some reason, things just fall apart. So let me break down some of these characters. We only have 3. So Hale. Hale is our main protagonist in basically a management position, trying to watch over Klein and Gibbs. And he's afraid, here's a few things. One, he's afraid that Gibbs is actually just trying to usurp his position, which is, one of those fears that we tend to put on each other, at least in corporations, where we're always, even managers to their people that they're managing, for some reason, it's always about competition. And this book is a little corporate and capitalist in a way too, and it kind of talks about some of those themes, those scary themes that we have at work, where we're constantly competing with each other, because Hale has this kind of glorified position, almost like a glorified employee position, like a shift leader. It doesn't totally feel like management necessarily, and also because it's such a small group. In addition, Hale struggles with actually getting his people under control because they're so obsessed with the thing in the snow. And it becomes almost a game. And it becomes this thing to the point where their workflow, they actually stop working productively, which bothers Hale a lot. He becomes incredibly anxious, and that's where we start to begin that isolation and everything kind of closing in, the worry, the freaking out. What is the corporation going to say about me, or what is my superior going to say about me? And they're so obsessed with the thing in the snow, and we aren't producing anything, and are they going to fire, all that stuff. We have Gibbs and Klein, and they are distinguishable characters, for sure. So Klein is kind of, I would say, our mediator between Gibbs and Hale, but definitely more on like the Gibbs friend side, because they aren't a manager. So another rule, at least, that seems to be in place is that managers shouldn't be hanging out with their employees. So that's why Hale doesn't hang out with Gibbs and Klein, even though all 3 of them are isolated in this place. So while Hale spends his weekends he doesn't even remember most of the time. It's just a blur. It's crazy. Gibbs and Klein admit, sometimes, they hang out on the weekends. Why wouldn't you? That would be terrible, right? So Gibbs is more pushy, hard-headed, no, we got to figure out the thing in the snow. Definitely is more argumentative and belligerent and pushes Hale. And she does it because she knows that there's something else going on. She thinks that Hale just doesn't see what else might be going on, and she pushes them a little further. So the characters are and they're relatable. We all have coworkers that are like Klein, who are just, make little games out of certain things, or random contests, or just I don't know. He's trying to moderate, and then it just ends up being a little ridiculous. We have people like Gibbs who are more just there to do the work, but also doesn't take any crap from their manager. And then we definitely have people like Hale, our do-gooder managers who just want to do what's right for the company. And sometimes to a fault, where they just are blindly following this stuff. So the world around them, especially for Hale, because he is extra isolated, he doesn't get to hang out with Klein or Gibbs, everything seems to kind of shrink in for him slowly, very gradually, as we go through this novel. Gilroy is he's a wrench. It's very random sometimes, but it kind of amplifies some of that fear factor, why is he here? Everybody in this research facility left. So why is he still here? And they create these theories around Gilroy, and they're just trying to figure him out too. So there's stuff like that in a lot of workplaces, especially if you've worked in a big company before, random, they're almost like ghost stories, but they're clearly not ghosts. They're just like a modern contemporary ghost. Like, oh, did you hear about that random box in the corner of the shoe department? Nobody ever touches that box. There's something weird about that. You know, there's like weird ghost stories surrounding workplaces sometimes. So that's kind of Gilroy a little bit. So that's really fun. And also there's these arbitrary rules or things that they don't really think about. Now we have somebody who comes in and interferes with that a little bit. So not only do we have those 4 characters in this research facility, a health inspector comes in and definitely throws a bit of a curveball and starts to ask questions. And for Hale, it's extremely stressful because he's like, oh, well, I've never really thought of that. I just do what I'm told. And this health inspector's like, why is it so cold? Why can't we turn up the heat in this place? You're a little overweight. And he's like, oh, I guess I am. I don't really think about that, but maybe I am. You know, just stuff like that. So there's things that are pushing Hale to start thinking about the company a little further than he ordinarily would. It becomes even more problematic when there's this mysterious thing in the snow, to the point where they're like ready to break the rules about the thing in the snow because they're so convinced it's like it's moving, but it's there and it won't like go away. What is it? You know, it's just their focal point. It's their only thing they're latching onto, their only different thing. And it just becomes very obsessive. So it's a very interesting novel, and it definitely has a lot of those workplace gripes and fears about not knowing exactly what you are doing, and you are just doing a thing, and it potentially could even be a bad thing. We don't know, especially when your superiors aren't necessarily being totally honest with you, why a facility is here, why you're here to be a placeholder, just all kinds of weird stuff, right? And weird arbitrary laws where you're just like, well, I guess I'll follow them. I'm just not sure why we need to. And especially for people who are isolated, you know, it is an interesting novel, but again, it is not for everybody. And it's not a book that I'll probably read over twice, but now that I've sat with it for a little bit, I feel it definitely resonated with me, especially as I read through it. It's definitely a slow burner, but it's fairly decent, I would say. It's a decent read. So check out The Thing in the Snow. This is by Sean Adams. I might check out The Heap. We'll see. If you are looking for something that's like hilarious, dark humor, this is also not necessarily the case, but it is a light, fun, weird, claustrophobic read. It is basically what the summary does say. It is that, with a few extra tidbits here and there. So check that book out and let us know what you think about it. You can do that over on YouTube. If you are watching, make sure to comment, to like, and to make sure to recommend this podcast to other dark readers out there. You can rate and review on your favorite listening app. I think Apple Podcasts is the one place you can very, very much do that, at least comment. But that really helps other dark readers find us as well. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook. We do post a lot of books that we're reading or things we've picked up, a lot of library hauls or look-throughs for like art books, etc., stuff like that. Stay tuned every Wednesday and Friday for new episodes and for new dark reads. Thank you guys so much for watching or listening, and we will see you another day.